Welcome to another edition of the Trucking on Route 66 in Missouri Oral History Project, a collaborative initiative between the Missouri State University Libraries and OzarksAlive.com. I'm Tom Peters, Dean of Library Services at Missouri State University. My colleague in this oral history project is Caitlin McConnell from OzarksAlive.com. This project is made possible in part by a grant from the Route 66 Corridor Preservation Program of the National Park Service. Today's date is Saturday, April 28th, 2018, and we are in Staunton, Illinois, this fine spring afternoon at Henry's Rabbit Ranch.
Yes.
And our special guest today is Rich Henry. Rich, thanks so much for agreeing to speak with us.
Glad to have you here,
Thanks.
Tom.
Thank you.
Nice to meet you and your family.
So you were telling me that you come from a trucking family?
Yes, I have.
Okay.
Yeah. My dad drove a truck for 61 years, which would have been from 1936 until 1997.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, that was his passion. That was his hobby.
Wow.
And one time my uncle asked him, my mom's brother, she says, Hubert, which was my dad's name, he says to him, you need a hobby. My dad says, what do you mean? He says, well, he plays golf. And he says, well, I have a hobby. And my uncle looks at him and he says, well, what was it? He says, driving a truck. And he says, I get paid for it. But, oh yeah, even when he was 77, 78 years old, he still had the twinkle in his eye when you talk about trucks. He retired at age 76.
Uh-huh.
And it was devastating when he finally had to, quit giving up his lifelong passion.
Yeah, he didn't want to stop.
No, he didn't want to. And
so what all did he, was he self-employed or?
Well, what happened, like in the picture you see here of him and his dad from 1937, back then they were did what you called wildcatting. Have you ever heard that term?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. It's like what we refer to nowadays, and I don't know if there's still much of it, trip leasing. And you weren't with one regular company. You might take a trip from Chicago to St. Louis for Midwest Freightways.
Yeah.
And then you might go from St. Louis back to Chicago for Nighthawk or somebody.
Uh-huh.
And but then in the late 40s or early 50s, my dad thought, he had a family and he was getting settled. They'd bought their house, and he was hauling loads for a company out of St. Louis called BMAC, and that was their home office. And I even have a little toy tractor trailer up here from BMAC, which I'll show you in a little bit.
Okay.
And they were hauling for him. Well, the union came in, and they protested, and they picketed BMAC. They said, these guys have been hauling for you steady, and we have to have you sign them up in the union with your regular drivers.
Uh-huh.
And so when they, that was the best thing that could have happened for them. They were in the Teamsters, Local 600 out of St. Louis.
Uh-huh.
So benefits and the whole 9 yards. And what was good about it is they held company seniority just as if they were driving a company piece of equipment. Yeah. So when they ran the dispatch, they would run it according to seniority. Well, that was good, but my dad knew eventually something like that was too good to last. So in 1959 or 60, Pete Good sent him a letter, gave him a year's notice, saying that a year from then they were going to go all company equipment. But they had the option of continuing with their driver company seniority, driving company equipment. So my dad tried it for a year. He had a 1960 Emeryville. The unit number was 980. And brand new truck. Nobody had drove it before him. He hated it. It was gutless, he said. And so he put up with it for a year. And then in 60, 61, he went to a company called MC Slater out of Granite City. They had been in St. Louis for years, and but he became an owner-operator. But it was hauling flatbed pulling a flatbed, iron and steel.
Uh-huh.
So he bought a trailer. So he did that for 10 years with MC Slater. Well, then in 1970 there was a big truck strike.
Yeah.
And Slater would not conform to the master policy. So he had, at that time, about 126 owner-operators, I think, roughly. And he lost probably 90% of them.
Wow.
And they all dispersed and went to different other companies that were union. And myself, I had worked at BMAC when I was in college from 65 to 69 in the office.
Uh-huh.
And then the last 6 months I drove in the city farm.
Okay.
And then before, when I was in high school, I had worked at this MC Slater where my dad worked. So this is why a lot of this stuff is familiar to me.
So what were you doing when you were in high school?
Well, when I was in high school, I was a gopher.
Uh-huh.
I was sweeping the floors for the mechanics in the shop.
Uh-huh.
I'd run from Grand City over to St. Louis to pick up parts in that farm. I loved it.
Yeah.
I'd cross the old Chain of Rocks Bridge.
Yeah.
You know, you didn't have the Interstate 270 bridge then.
Right.
And it was really a lot of fun. And also, I had a job at a gas station in North St. Louis County on Route 66 at a mobile station. And so between the two, that was my high school job. And then when I went to college, I worked in the office at BMAC full time,
Uh-huh.
3:30 at midnight.
Uh-huh.
So I've always been around trucks myself. And growing up with my dad, this picture here on the wall, if you look right next to his head, it says BMAC.
Yeah.
It's faint, but you can see it.
Yeah.
And from the time I was about 3 years old, like in the picture there, BMAC used to let their drivers take their kids with them, their sons.
Uh-huh.
And all they had to do was notify them ahead before the trip. Then that way, they would put it on the manifest with the driver's name that there was a passenger going along.
Uh-huh.
And for insurance purposes, everything was covered then. So I rode a lot with my dad. And I can remember talking about that company truck, 980. I rode with him in a trip on that down to Tulsa, Oklahoma. And it was a gutless truck compared to what he was used to.
Yeah.
He had, in the picture here, he bought it brand new. It was a 1950 GMC four-cylinder Detroit diesel.
Uh-huh.
And they referred to that style as the Cannonball. And back in the late 50s and early 60s, there was even a series on TV called the Cannonball Express. I don't know
Yeah.
if you ever heard of that. And they drove a Cannonball tractor hooked to a tandem axle, probably about a 28, 30-foot trailer.
Uh-huh.
And if you Google search it, it'd probably come up showing this TV series.
Yeah. I
And
remember
then
it. Cannonball Run. Yeah.
Cannonball Express.
Cannonball Express.
Yeah, Cannonball
Oh, there was a
Run.
movie called Cannonball Run. Yeah.
Yeah. And then in the mid to late 70s, there was another half-hour, 60-minute sitcom called Moving On with Claude Akins.
Uh-huh.
That was on TV. But my dad, one time somebody said to him, it might have been when he was getting blood taken, that instead of having blood in his veins, he had diesel fuel. And he actually convinced Pete Good, the owner of BMAC, because most of the owner-operators in the 50s were diesel trucks. Well, BMAC had all gasoline trucks.
Uh-huh.
My dad kept telling him, he says, you ought to go to diesels. You know, it's the
So
engine.
what was the attraction of diesel? Was it?
It was cheap operating cost.
Uh-huh.
It was a lot less maintenance.
Uh-huh.
You didn't have spark plugs that you'd have to change ever so often. A diesel engine, the injectors were always good for like 100,000 miles or so.
Oh, wow.
They had more pulling power, more torque.
Uh-huh.
They might not have had more horsepower than a gasoline engine, but they had torque, pounds of torque.
Uh-huh.
And that's a big thing
That's a big
in
thing.
coming to tractors.
Yeah.
So he actually made a comment one time, probably by getting Pete Good to go to diesel equipment, is probably what ended their tenure being owner-operators
Wow.
quicker than it would have. But, and him and my brother in the late 70s, early 80s, they started their own trucking company. After my dad left Slater, he was with a company called Artem Transportation.
Artem.
A-R-T-I-M. And they were out of Hammond, Gary, Indiana, steel hauling. And since they have ceased to operate, like so many, companies, and most of the companies back then, you had your big companies like PIE, Navajo, BMAC, they were union.
Yeah.
Well, as maybe you might know, in the mid to late 70s, after the airline industry was deregulated, they deregulated the transportation industry.
Yeah.
It was kind of like a domino effect.
Yeah.
And in one respect, maybe it was good, but it really put the traditional trucking industry into a total cabas.
Yeah.
Because in St. Louis, down on Hall Street, where most of the major trucking companies were, and Hall Street probably runs for 4 miles long. On each side was just one trucking company after another. And there were some that were in other areas of the city of St. Louis. I'd worked for a company called Superior Forwarding. And they just ran out of Little Rock to St. Louis, but they would haul between St. Louis and Little Rock 40 loads a night, and they had it pretty well wrapped up.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I've seen a lot of changes.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
where did you grow up?
In St. Louis.
Oh, okay. So these early pictures were taken in St. Louis?
That right there was taken in St. Louis at 3711 Siloam in Pine Lawn,
Okay.
which is right next to the city limits of St. Louis. You couldn't tell going from the city to Pine Lawn, you even went out of it.
Yeah.
And we lived on the same street as on Siloam as the iconic Ted Drews in St. Louis.
Yeah.
They lived a few houses down.
Oh.
And every once in a while, back in the early 90s, I'd seen Ted Drews at his place over there. We got talking. And I told him, I said, yeah, originally I'm from St. Louis. He said, oh yeah, where at? I saw a little area called Pine Lawn. He said, yeah, where at in Pine Lawn? I said, well, there's a steak and shake up at Natural Bridge in Siloam. He says, really? He says, you remember what house you lived in? I thought he was interviewing me. And I said, well, let me think. I said, well, we were the 4th house down on the left from Natural Bridge. He said, your dad was a truck driver. I said, you're right. And that was the truck he was talking about.
Wow.
So every once in a while when I get a traveler here, and if they're headed west, what most of them are,
Yeah.
and a lot of them stop at Ted Drews, I say to them, I say, if you see Ted there himself, he's probably in his early to mid 80s by now, tell him you was talking to the guy whose dad used to be the truck driver where he grew up at in Pine Lawn.
Yeah.
So, but it's really funny just how things kind of follow you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what did your dad haul?
Well, when he worked at BMAC, he pulled company trailers, vans. And it was just a common carrier, just any kind of freight that the city drivers had picked up.
Yeah.
And then in his later years, he basically was just hauling iron and steel. And he retired after Artem. He left there and he went to Spectre Red Ball. And he was there then for about 7 years, and that's when he retired.
Yeah.
To really help my brother get this Henry transportation going.
Yeah.
And that was probably my dad's lifelong passion, dream.
So what did Henry Transportation haul?
They hauled carpet mainly.
Really?
Yeah. My brother had the vision of hauling carpet out of the northern part of Georgia, where all the carpet mills were.
Yeah.
And at one time, at the highlight, the pinnacle of their operating, they were probably hauling from Georgia to the St. Louis area 85 to 90% of all the carpet.
Wow.
Oh yeah, it was nothing if you were on the interstate between St. Louis and Chattanooga, Dalton, Georgia, to see 7 or 8 Henry trucks,
Yeah.
you know, in a day or more.
And this is back when carpet was all on a roll, big rolls.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it still is, as far as I know.
Well, a lot of times, I know in like libraries and places like that,
Yeah.
they're all in like yard, square.
Oh, okay. Yeah, those are
They come in boxes.
palletized.
They come in boxes.
Yeah, yeah. A lot of your commercial buildings do that.
Yeah.
The reason is, if a piece of carpet gets damaged, they can just repiece that tile section
Yep.
instead of you know, a whole row or something.
Doing the whole thing, yeah.
And then also they had a small warehouse in Springfield, Missouri. I can't remember the exact street, but if you went down Highway 65 off of 44,
Uh-huh.
and you got off at Chestnut Expressway,
Yeah.
you crossed some railroad tracks,
Yeah.
and then there was a radio station on the left.
Yeah.
And you turned there, and
Yeah.
you went into this commercial,
KWTO was the radio
Yeah.
station.
and you went back in there, and they had a warehouse there.
Uh-huh.
And it was there occasionally. Sometimes they need an extra driver in the evening. And besides doing my insurance and other stuff here, occasionally I would make a trip for them. I'd leave at 7 o'clock at night from St. Louis, go down there, switch trailers, come back, get in about 3 in the morning, then come up here and sleep for a few hours.
And
But-
open up.
And then I'd be here. But it was fun. I enjoyed it. And that's, you know, I guess I still have this lifelong dream of making one more truck. But I might be able to do it someday with my Campbell 66 truck.
Yeah. So you're saying that you keep up your CDL
Yeah.
license. Yeah. And you even do the
The DOT physical.
physical.
Yeah.
So you could drive right now.
Right.
If
Right
I had a
now,
load I needed to have taken, you'd.
let's say Yellow Freight. I used to make casual trips for Yellow Freight.
Uh-huh.
And let's say if I went down there and got in their casual list, and they said, we got a Springfield, Missouri turn that you can make legally, I could go right off and do it.
Wow.
So
And so that was when I-44 was finished, when you were doing the.
now,
Right.
when I did it for my brother and dad, it was all I-44.
Yeah.
But now back when I got out of college, I taught school for 2 years.
Uh-huh.
We'll get into a little bit of mine if you want.
Yeah.
So I didn't like it. So I had gotten experience at BMAC driving the city.
Yeah.
So I drove a truck for a carpet company for a while from St. Louis to St. Paul, Minnesota.
Uh-huh.
I'd go up Route 66 to Dwight, Illinois, and up that way and come back the same way.
Yeah. What is that? 47? I forget what
47.
Yeah.
Yeah, it goes
Wow.
up to Yorkville, over 80.
I used to live in DeKalb, so.
Okay,
Yeah.
it was. That's 47.
Yeah.
So I did that for a while, and then I got tired of working for them, so I became an owner-operator at this Artem for a while. So then I got a job as their terminal manager, and I had my dad, 2 brothers, and an uncle under me. But I didn't treat anybody any different.
Your brother's older than you?
My brother's 4 years older than me,
Oh,
but
boy,
my
that
brother
was-
didn't work there. It was my uncles,
Oh, okay.
2 uncles,
Okay.
a cousin, and my dad.
And they were all under you.
They were under me. I was the terminal manager. And I had no problems with my dad and one uncle, but another uncle and cousin, I had more trouble with them than any other driver. I even tried having my one uncle hit me so I could fire him. But he knew what I was up to. But away from there, it was Uncle John.
Yeah.
But there
But it
it was.
worked. But it was work. It
Yeah,
was,
so I stood my ground. But then later on, I was making trips for Yellow and CF. And I can remember a trip I was making going down to Springfield, Missouri. And it was when you still had the area of Devil's Elbow,
yeah.
you know, open.
Yeah.
And I started passing this Jones truck line tractor. And,
Out of Fayetteville?
Jonesboro, Arkansas.
Jonesboro.
No, Springdale, Arkansas.
Springdale, yeah.
That's where Jones Truck Line was. So, and I hadn't been down that way for a while, so I wasn't really familiar with it. It was at night, and it was right as you, like, where it still exists there, and you're headed west, and they got kind of a little lip on the side. And the lanes themselves look like they're only 9 feet wide. Maybe they're 10, I don't know.
I think
Even
they might
still,
have been 9, yeah.
it's not too wide. So I started passing this guy, and he's kind of speeding it up. And I thought, well, I'm going to get around you. Well, all of a sudden, the truck I had only had, back then, they had one air tank reserve. And not long after that, it was legal that they had to have 2 tanks.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, I'm going down the hill, I'm hitting my air brakes, and my warning buzzer comes on, which means you're at 60 pounds.
Yeah.
And you always want to keep it in gear, at least have some braking back.
Yeah.
So I thought, man, I hope this ends soon. And I couldn't even see his headlights, the guy had passed. And it did bottom out finally, but that was probably one of my more scary experiences.
Would you stop on the way down to Springfield? Did you have a usual stop that you'd?
I'll tell you what, I was like my dad. We didn't like stopping. You know, when you got in, it was maybe stop along the road, kick the tires, and continue. Between St. Louis and Springfield, I'd never stop.
Really?
I'd get to Springfield, like when I was taking the trips for my brother, then I'd switch trailers. And a lot of times I might eat something that I took with me from home. Yeah. And then I'd be back in the cab. I could do St. Louis to Springfield in 3 hours or less.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you like driving at night?
Yes, I do.
Yeah. Because
there's less traffic.
Yeah.
And during the day, you can see better. You know, or at least, you know, it was always nicer for me.
Yeah.
You know. Now, sometimes it's nice driving during the day. Sometimes I'd make these Springfield, Missouri trips. They might have an extra one on the weekend. So, and usually on the weekend, you'd be coming back with an empty trailer. So, sometimes what I'd do on the way back, if it was early in the afternoon, I might get off around St. Roberts and hop over on the old Devil's Elbow stretch. I know people had to think this guy's lost. You know, in a modern day 18-wheeler, 53-foot long, but it was just, you know, cruising 66 on the way back.
Yeah, just for the fun.
You know, yeah.
So how far? So your dad drove a truck for 61?
61 years. He started when he was 15 years old.
Really?
And here's a good story on that. He was riding with his dad. Well, in order to even ride with him, you had to have a chauffeur's license. Now they call them CDLs. Back then it was called a chauffeur's license.
Yeah.
So they're coming in to Indiana. But I think on this one truck, that one up on top there, it has my grandfather's name on it. That might say St. Louis, Missouri in that one. But some of these others would say Osceola, Indiana. I think that they kind of used, Indiana had the cheapest plates. So
that's why a lot of trucking firms were based out of Indiana.
Yeah, even yet.
Yeah.
So they're coming into Indiana, and my my grandfather says to my dad, he says, we got to get you a chauffeur's license so you're legal to ride with me. So they come into this little driver's license facility, and he says, put on the chauffeur's cap, put on these sunglasses, and go in there and tell him you want to get a chauffeur's license. So here he is, 15 years old, goes in there, fills out some paperwork, and the lady says, that'll be $25. Came back out, and he had a chauffeur's license.
Wow.
Yeah.
So your grandfather drove a truck as well?
Yeah, yeah.
Now where'd he drive?
Well, they would do this wildcatting. And when they first started, they actually, in the picture of the Little Rascals, that was taken in Toledo, Ohio. Well, it wasn't too long after that, they moved over around Grand Rapids and the Bay City, Michigan area.
Yeah.
And then they were taking loads from up in Michigan down to St. Louis. And you could always get freight coming to St. Louis. But it was hard getting freight out of St. Louis.
You didn't want to run. Yeah, you didn't want to run empty.
No, no. Unless you had something that was paying so fantastic.
Yeah.
You had to haul both ways. So, I don't know, it was my grandfather and my dad, they says, well, if you're going to have to be sitting for a day or two sometimes, you'd be better off living in St. Louis, where you live there and you can be sitting, than somewhere else. That's how they got to St. Louis.
Yeah. So when did your grandfather get into trucking? I mean, if your dad was started at 31.
I would have to guess, and this is more of what it is, because my dad never really talked much about him.
Huh.
Because things happened with the family, and
Yeah.
he left my grandmother.
Oh.
So, there was never much talk about him. In
Yeah.
fact, that picture there with him in it is kind of a rarity.
Uh-huh.
But I would say maybe back in the mid-20s. It seems like at first he was a bus driver. And then he got into trucks.
Yeah.
And for my dad's sake, it was probably the best thing that could have ever happened.
Yeah.
My dad was 100%
He
truck
loved
driver.
it. He loved it. Huh?
Oh, some of the stories. When I was older, there was times where him and me would be running together with going to the same customer or something.
Uh-huh.
And I always thought that was kind of neat. Because here I am riding with him back in the 50s, early
Yeah.
60s.
Yeah.
So here now we are going down the road and I'm following him in an 18-wheeler. I mean, how much better can that get? Oh, shoot. And there's hardly a day when I come in here where I don't look at these pictures here
And just,
and reminisce about something.
yeah.
My dad's favorite statement was, don't go across the truck scales, even if you're legal, because they can find something wrong with you.
Oh.
Well, then that gave them an excuse to haul more freight. Since you weren't going to go across the scales, the more freight you hauled, the more money you made.
Yeah.
And another thing my dad said, what he loved about driving a truck, he said you could make as much money as you wanted. It was unlimited.
Huh.
You could make 4 trips a week instead of 2 or 3 trips a week.
Yeah.
The potential was there.
Yeah.
And he never took any pills or anything.
Really? Yeah.
No, he never did.
Yeah. Coffee was kind of it.
He drank coffee. The pills I always heard him refer to as bennies,
Yeah.
which is Benzedrine.
Right.
And in fact, in some of your truck driving songs, Dave Dudley, 6 Days on the Road, have you
Yeah.
ever heard that?
Yeah.
In it, if I remember correct, it says, taking little white pills, my eyes are open wide.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but no, my dad, he might not have ran legally with his logbook in that, but he had fun.
Yeah.
And I can remember different times when I was with him, and we would get stopped. And his nickname should have been No Fear. They had that brand of clothing that came out back in the 80s.
Yeah.
That was him. I never saw him get excited.
Yeah.
I mean, you could be driving on slick ice, and maybe he was running faster than he should,
Just be
but he
as
didn't have white knuckles.
And be
He
as
just
calm as
sat there very peaceful and calm.
Yeah.
And what he always said about the weather, we listen to the weather and we hear storms are coming in or something. He says, don't worry about it. He says, just get in and go. He says, 95% of the time, it won't happen.
Yeah.
And he was right.
Yeah.
He said, just get in and go. And he said, if you get in it and go and you get caught in it, just keep going. Don't stop.
Yeah.
He says, that's where they make their mistakes. I remember one time I was making a casual trip for BMAC. This would have been back in the mid-70s. And I'm leaving St. Louis and coming up Riverview, get on 270, big snowflakes. By the time we cross over into Illinois, the road's just snowpacked. By the time I got up to 55 off of 270, there was already cars and trucks off in the ditch.
Huh.
So I kept going up 55, and I was running with this other guy. His name was Jerry Adams.
Yeah.
And he was a young kid, and I wasn't much older. And he kept wanting to stop. He says, don't you think we should stop? I says, what for? We're not stuck. I had my dad's philosophy. So we get up about Bloomington. There used to be a 76 truck stop there. I don't know what they call it now. But he wants to get off. I said, you do what you want. I said, I'm going. So I kept on going. He followed me. He didn't get off. We went another 15 miles, and the snow was dissipating.
Oh.
We got up before Dwight. There wasn't even no snow.
Snow. No snow.
Ran out of it.
Yeah. Wow.
So, but my dad was a real treat. He was like what you look back and you see your cowboys in the Western films. This is what he was with the truck driving.
Yeah.
If they would have had films on that.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
So how did you get? So you got into insurance then? You said.
Yeah. See what happened. was working for my dad and brother when I was getting their company started in the office. And so I don't know, it just working for a family sometimes don't work out. You know, and I still got a good relationship with my older brother that him and my dad had the company. So I had an opportunity in 1982 to become an insurance agent with the company we had our car insurance with. I'd never sold nothing before, but I thought, if you do what you're supposed to do and do the job right, you got to be successful. My dad's philosophy. So I got with American National, better known as American National Property and Casualty out of Springfield, Missouri. And I was there from October 27th of 82 till December 1st of 2016.
Really?
Yeah, 34 years.
So you lived in Springfield for 34 years?
No, I didn't live there.
Oh.
I was an agent farm up in Granite City.
Okay.
And my office was on Nameoki Road, which was a 26 to 30 alignment. And then I bought this place here in August of 1988. And when I bought this ground, I did not even know that road there was Route 66. I liked the location, the price was right. I wanted to start a second insurance office. And also when I started a second insurance office here, I started a license and title service with the Secretary of State in Illinois, and I'm still licensed for it yet today. In Missouri, they'd call that Department of Revenue, that does your license and titles. So, but that's how I became an insurance agent. And it was good. And you know, like I say, in the early 90s, I started making Springfield, Missouri trips for my brother and dad's trucking company in the evening. So I had the best of both worlds for a while.
Wow.
Yeah.
How'd you get the Campbell 66 Express?
Well, here's what happened there. The first piece of equipment I got is a trailer over on the left. That's a 75 Fruhoff. And it's very rare because it's got swing doors on the back. Most of the trailers have roll-out doors. And I have some newsletters of Campbell 66, they call them camel tracks. And one of them is about from that era. And in there it had this article how excited they were to be getting, I don't know, it was 12 or 20 new trailers with swing doors. This is one of them they're talking about. And on that trailer there, they never finished lettering it all. They got the camel and all that graphics on there, but up front, where they put the EW, the empty weight of the trailer, and some other stuff, it's not completed. And I think what happened, from my own experience with trucking companies, this truck was over in the shop, and they got a call from the dispatcher to pick up a load. They needed a trailer. The only trailer we got on the lot is this empty new Fruhoff in the shop being detailed out.
They put it on the road?
Never made it back in. Yeah, that's my take on it. But it's very unusual because you can look at the other trailers out there. That was the first one I got. I got that in April of 1997 from the Quad Cities. A friend of mine that lived up there, and I'd started this place here through 66 in 95. And being my family history what it was, oh, that'd be neat to have a Campbell City 6 trailer. And when I went up there, I bought a tractor from my brother's company to get it. And that's what was nice. I always had access to a commercial tractor. I went up there and brought it down. And that was the first piece of equipment. So then, in August of 98, we go down to Springfield, Missouri. I'm wanting to hit all these flea markets and see if I can't find Campbell 66 paraphernalia. And I did. I was pretty successful. But the biggest find was the tractor. What happened is we were down there Saturday, Sunday, and we left Monday afternoon. And as we're leaving Monday afternoon on the north, what I call like a bypass, I don't know what the official name of it is, there was a truck salvage yard there, Truxton Auto Salvage. And I'm going along, and my wife at the time, I said to her, I think I just saw a Campbell 66 tractor. She said, oh, you gotta be kidding. I said, no, really. So I U-turn and I head back west, Over on the right, behind this big 8-foot cyclone fence, is this tractor sitting there with the Campbell 66 colors. Well, in the meantime, they had taken off the lettering that was original from Campbell's on it, and because I had that all redone later, the way it was. So I stopped there and I'm taking pictures, and still had everything original as you see it now, except on the doors the Campbell 66 letters and ICC numbers and all that. So this guy from inside, he says, "Can I help you?" I said, "Well, I was just taking pictures of the tractor here." I said, "Well, that was a Campbell 66, wasn't it?" He said, "Yeah." And he said, "You want to come inside the fence?" He said, let me get our dogs tied up, junkyard dogs. I said, "Yeah, that'd be nice." So once he did, I went inside and I'm taking pictures. And I had no intention of buying it. And I might have asked him. He said, "It's for sale." It was $2,500. I said, "Oh no," I said, I just wanted to get pictures. So I get back, this is when we still had film cameras. I get the film back from being developed. I'm looking at it. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, it's an 81 GMC Astro. I got a 75 Fruhoff. Perfect era.
Yeah.
So I started getting hepped up on it. I call him up down there in Springfield, Missouri, Truxton Auto Salvage. And I says, "Hey, what's the deal on that truck?" He says, "Well, we can't sell it now because it's consigned to our auction we're going to have."
Oh.
After 40-some years, they decided to go out of business. Like, oh, what a bummer. So I thought, well, I'll go down to the auction. It was in September, the first week of September. So I was going to leave my office in Granite City on a Friday evening and drive down there and get a motel room and go to the auction in the morning. I had a letter of credit from my bank and all that. So Friday afternoon, I'm in the office. I got a 81 Volkswagen Rabbit, no air conditioning. It's extremely hot outside, like 95 degrees. And man, I don't even feel like going. And so then Saturday morning, I'm up here. My wife, she says, "Well, what happened? You didn't go?" I said, "It was just too hot." Well, I come in here Saturday morning, I'm regretting it. I should have went.
Yeah.
So I'm on the phone, I get hold of the auctioneer, and I told him what happened. I said I was going to come and it didn't work out. I said, "Could I give you a bid over the phone somehow?"
Yeah.
And this is before you really had stuff like that.
Yeah.
He says, "Well, I don't know." He said, "Where do you live at?" I said, "Staunton, Illinois." He said, "Did you say Staunton, Illinois?" I said, "Yeah, why?" He says, his stepfather lives here in Staunton.
Oh.
I says, "Really?" I said, "I probably know him." He said, "What would be your limit that you'd go?" I said, $2,000. And he says, "Okay, we can do it." So here I am Saturday. I'm then pins and needles. I don't hear from him. So about 2:30, maybe even later, I thought, I'm going to call him. And I call him and he says, "You got it." He said it went up to 1900 or 1950. So
And that's
it was divine intervention. You know, I bid 2,000. So I got a check down to him. So about a week or two later, we go down to get it. I mean, here is a tractor. Who knows if it's going to make it out of their yard?
Yeah.
And we go down in an 83 Volkswagen Rabbit convertible with a toolbox. So we get down there, and they did put 2 new batteries in it, or 4 new batteries, take that back. And so I'm checking all the fluid levels, the transmissions, the rear ends, and that. And I thought, well, here we go. So when we pulled out, and I got on the north bypass to get up to 44, every color of the rainbow was coming out of the smokestack. Because all this truck did, I think, from 93 until when I bought it, 98. I think they just used it around there to
Just
hook
to
up,
pull
to
stuff.
pull equipment around and cut it up for salvage.
Yeah.
This had a couple parts taken off of it. It might have been next. So, so I keep thinking, well, the closer I get to St. Louis, that's that much less it has to be towed if it breaks down. And I checked with a wrecker service in Illinois, just in case, if I need their service. So we get up on 44, and I knew the area well for making these Springfield, Missouri trips for my brother. So I get off at Stratford there, go over to the truck stop to put fuel in it and check the air in the tires. So, and by that time, I kept watching the smoke come out of the exhaust. It was just black. It gotten better. And I'm feeling a little more comfortable. So I get fuel, start heading up. Well, by the time we get up past Lebanon, I'm getting a lot of these truckers, like Roadway and that, passing me, giving me the thumbs up, because they realize it's a Campbell 66 tractor.
Yeah.
So we get off at Doolittle. There's a rust area there.
Yeah.
And I pull in, I leave it running. This sounded like a brand new truck by then.
Wow. Wow.
There was not one drop of oil underneath.
Wow.
Yeah. And the truck itself, right now, and I haven't put no miles on it since I brought it up here, only has 400,000 miles on it, which is unusual.
Yeah.
Even when I bought it, the story on the truck is, when Campbell's liquidated, their last day of operation, I think, was March 3rd of 1986.
Yeah, something like that.
And then they were in bankruptcy.
Yeah.
And it was for like 3 years, and maybe you know from living there, that they must just, all the equipment just sat somewhere.
Yeah.
So when they did finally get through that, some little outfit, and they had a place in Springfield, Missouri, and Tulsa, Oklahoma, called Tiger Steel Corporation. They bought it. And I found paperwork in there.
Yeah.
And then this truck salvage, Buxton, when I got it, where the lettering is, they had put tin signs over on the door with rivets in it. So I get up here, I get the tin sign off. It's got this Tiger Steel Corporation signs on it. And so I carefully remove it. And you know what was underneath? The shadow of the original letters. So that's why I was able to duplicate how it was on the door.
Yeah.
Because there was a shadow. When Tiger Steel Corporation got it, they must have took off the vinyl lettering.
Yeah.
But it had been on there from 81 till 98,
Yeah.
or 88, 89. So it gave a difference
Still.
in the paint scheme.
Yep.
So I penciled that. And then the door on the right needed replacing anyway. Well, my brother, they had an Astro down there that he had parted out. I got both doors off of it and some other stuff. So I had a friend of mine who was in a body shop business repaint the doors, and then I took them up to a place in Carlinville that does computerized truck lettering. And I took the other door that I'd taken off, that I had penciled the images, and I said, this is how I want it to be. So that's how it came out. The only thing I got to do in the doors yet, along the bottom, is that paint line that goes from the...
Right.
I got the paint one time, and I never finished it. But most people don't even realize.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's the story. So then, that was when I got the tractor, September of '98. And what's really neat is Nyland came out with a little Campbell 66 tractor trailer, GMC Astro. The only thing that's different, they always use sleeper cabs. But on the truck that they used, same coloring, you know what the unit number is? It's not 539 like I got, it's 537. So how close can you get?
Wow.
So then I got my second trailer, which is the one behind the Fruhoff trailer.
Yeah.
It's a 1977 Copco. It's got a roll-up door. I got that given to me over in St. Charles, Missouri. One of my brother's customers, a carpet dealer, they had it, and the roll-up door had come apart,
Oh,
and they just wanted to get rid of it.
let's just get rid of this thing.
I got it for the taking.
Wow.
Borrowed a truck from my brother again,
Yeah.
brought it up here. About 3 months later, I'm out there, I'm messing with the door. I piece it all back together and get it in. So then the last one, and I don't get complacent, you know, because that was in 1999, October, one from St. Charles. This little pup trailer.
Uh-huh.
I had found it years before, maybe back in the late 90s. A lady out south of Six Flags. Her husband had worked at Campbell 66. Before they went out of business, he was a city draw or something. He had bought this from them for storage.
Yeah.
It's a 1967
Wow.
Champion is the make.
Huh.
So I'd seen it years before. I said to her, I said, June was her name. I said, if you ever go to get rid of this trailer, let me know. Well, in September of 2012, I mean, this is like 8-10 years later,
Yeah.
I get an email from her. She said, are you still interested in this trailer? So
Yeah.
my older brother went with me at the time, and I had gotten a lot of mounted tires. When he finally closed up his trucking company, I still got spares sitting around here.
Yeah.
So I went out there with 4 good tires. We took off what was on there because it was really rotten,
Yeah.
and put on some better ones. And at that time, I didn't have access to a tractor anymore. But a local customer that come in that I did license and title for,
Uh-huh.
he had a little company.
Uh-huh.
And I asked him, his name was Tim Mayfield. I says, Tim, can I get you to do me a favor? And Tim was a great guy. So one Saturday morning, Tim and me went out to where this was situated. And I mean, this was like up in the boonies.
Yeah.
And I figured if it got in there, we can get it out, you know. So we got that. That was the last one to come in.
Yeah.
And
To date, anyway.
yeah,
You
what
never know.
I would really like, I know where there's a couple other little 24, 26-foot trailer pups, but they're in such bad shape.
Well, I know there's one south of Springfield,
Uh-huh.
just north of, well, it's east of Ozark. I
Okay.
forget the name of the little town.
Yeah.
Guy out there.
But
But it's in pretty bad shape.
But by now, just like these two I got,
Pretty bad shape.
there's one in Pacific, Missouri, that used to be a used car dealer there. I looked at it one time. And then the lady who I got this one from, her son,
Uh-huh.
at Bourbon, Missouri, he's got like a railroad salvage thing
Uh-huh.
that he
Yeah.
sells stuff. And he's got one.
Oh, really?
And I don't even know if either of those two trailers, if you could hook up to them, would make it up here.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
Right. Right.
floor members are so deteriorated and.
Yeah.
yeah.
So I got to ask you about,
Yeah.
so how'd you get interested in VW rabbits?
My dad, diesel powered rabbits.
Uh-huh.
In 1982, one day, when I'm working for him and my brother, he says, here, take my little rabbit pickup truck. I had to pick up some parts or
Yeah.
do some paperwork for him somewhere.
Yeah.
So it's a little 81 Volkswagen Rabbit diesel. I fell in love with it. So 3 months later, I bought my first Volkswagen Rabbit, but I bought a car, 4-door,
Yeah.
I had 3 kids.
Yeah.
So he started collecting them. I started collecting them. And anytime, maybe we'd find one that was wrecked, he'd buy it cheap,
Yeah.
or find one that had a blowed up motor with a good body.
Yeah.
So when he passed away in '99, I inherited all his personal vehicles.
Uh-huh.
In 1999, I figured out, between him and me, I had about 40 Volkswagen Rabbits. Yeah. But see, fortunately, I had a place out in the country
Yeah.
with 15 acres of ground.
Uh-huh.
So a lot of them were out there.
Yeah.
But that has
You had
gotten
40
off.
rabbits.
I had 40 Volkswagen Rabbits.
Wow.
Yeah.
How many do you have here?
I'd say right now, not counting what it looks like our Cadillac ranch
Yeah.
over there.
You did that?
I did that. Yeah, so I always
Was
thought-
it, was it in honor of the Cadillac Ranch out west?
Well, see, what I tried to do here is mimic a lot of 66 icons out there.
Uh-huh.
So the Volkswagen Rabbits with the Cadillac Ranch.
Yeah,
If you get out in Joseph City, Arizona, there's a place called the Jack Rabbit Trading
yeah,
Post.
yeah,
And that's their sign there. It says,
Yeah.
here it is.
yeah.
Well, see what I did?
There it
A
is.
takeoff
Yeah.
from it. And see, what I wanted to do when I started this place in 95, in fact, in 95, I didn't know where I was going with it.
Yeah.
It was called Henry's Old 66 Emporium. Well, in 99, I met this character out in Arizona, Juan, at the snow cap. And I'd heard so much about this guy, his antics and that,
There was he full of
and I thought, man, this is what I want to do.
Yeah.
So when I got out there and met him, this guy, I was just awed at the way he performed.
Uh-huh.
So long story short, and see, when I was getting back, the bunny rabbits were coming into the picture.
Yeah.
My 20
The live rabbits.
The live rabbits.
So first it was VW rabbits.
Well, I got started in that. My dad passed away in August of 99. I closed up my office in Granite City about the same time, and I was moving everything here, where I'd just be here all the time.
Uh-huh.
So I'd have time on my hands to do stuff.
Yeah.
So, and I got these 15, 16 rabbits from my youngest daughter at the time. So I'm coming back on the airplane, and I'm wanting to do something. I want to really make something of this place, where if you read about it, you'd want to see it. And if you ever saw it, you'd never forget it.
Yeah.
And you'd want to come back again.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking, Henry's Rabbit Ranch, Cadillac Ranch, Volkswagen Rabbits, but I didn't want to just do it from Old 66, Henry's Old 66 Emporium,
Uh-huh.
and just swap it over.
Yeah.
So what I did gradually, when I first started out, it was Henry's Old Route 66 Emporium / Rabbit Ranch. Well, then it was Henry's Old 66 Rabbit Ranch or something. I just kept eliminating from the first name.
Uh-huh.
Then I got to Henry's Route 66 Rabbit Ranch. Well, then one day this friend of mine, her name was Patty Kuhn, great, neat person. She started the Scenic Byway program in Illinois. And we were good friends. So one day she says to me, she said, I'm surprised you haven't thought of it. I said, what's that, Patty? She says, well, the way you spell the word rabbit. She says, why don't you do it
Oh, yeah.
like this? Well, then I was able to take off Henry's Route 66 Rabbit Ranch and incorporate 66 right here in the word rabbit. So that's how it's been ever since.
Let me hold this up to the
Yeah.
camera so that people.
Yeah, you can keep it. Keep that. Take it with you. So, so ever since then, anything that I do here, our T-shirts or whatever, that's the way we spell rabbit.
Yeah.
And I kind of use that in my pun with the travelers. I used to really pride myself on spelling. I was a school teacher. And I said, now I don't even know how to spell the word rabbit. You know. But I do have fun here.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, I can tell you. Yeah, this is.
I mean, I have a passion for it. Our bunny rabbit population has dwindled down to 4. In 2003, I had 49 bunnies.
Okay.
I had Volkswagen bunnies, I had bunny rabbits, but I knew as I was getting older that I couldn't keep this up for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
So I just kind of let the numbers both start dying down, literally.
Yeah.
And the same with the cars. Every once in a while, I have an opportunity to sell one to somebody.
Uh-huh.
So I'd sell one.
So what are you down to now? Do you know how many rabbits you
I
have?
have, not counting the Cadillac Ranch ones, I got about 15.
Yeah.
Because also inside my building here, I have 5 more
Yeah.
besides what you see outside.
You got something else out here too.
Oh, that now, have you ever heard of Bob Waldmeyer?
Yes.
That was Bob's car.
Really?
That's why I got that. That's a 1967 VW Type 3 station wagon.
Uh-huh.
And I knew Bob fairly well, not as well as some people, but we were friends, and he'd stop by and we'd talk. And
Uh-huh.
in the last days before he passed away, myself and other people would be up there visiting with him.
Yeah.
So after he passes away, I get a phone call from his brother Bill. And most people aren't familiar with Bill. His brother Buzz is the one that's kind of carrying on Bob's legacy.
Uh-huh.
And Bill calls me. He says, before Bob passed away, he went over different things, seeing if people would like it, just to give it to him.
Uh-huh.
So this is what I inherited.
Okay.
And what Bob was a stickler for paperwork.
Uh-huh.
I have a stack of paperwork for that car from the very first day he bought it, the original bill of sale, to the last mechanical thing he had
All the
done.
service record? Yeah.
Plus the original title still
Wow.
in Bob's name.
Wow.
So that's the, now if it hadn't been Bob's car, I probably wouldn't have taken it. It sat up at their family homestead in Rochester, Illinois. From the time Bob got his famous Volkswagen van in 84, 85,
Mm-hmm.
it just sat there.
Hmm.
And I got it in September of 2010 and brought it down here. So it's been here going on 8 years now.
Yeah.
But it's Bob's memory, and that's why I wanted to kind of keep it and keep
Yeah.
it the way it was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So now you just open when you want to be open, or?
Yes.
Yeah.
What happened is December 1st of 2016, I mentioned before, I retired from the insurance business. Because being self-employed for the last 34 years, I had to provide my own retirement.
Yeah.
So with IRAs, at age 69 and a half, you got to start drawing them,
Yep.
or you're going to be penalized.
Right.
So I thought this was the time to do it. So I used December 1st for 2016 to retire. And then right after that, I had a major pituitary tumor surgery operation. I didn't know how I was going to come out from that a little over a year ago.
Uh-huh.
So from January of 2017 until the end of April, I didn't feel like doing nothing.
Yeah, it was just last year.
I just sat over in this old trailer that used to sit over here
Uh-huh.
with a bunny rabbit, just passing the time of day. I'd see travelers over here. I didn't even feel like coming over here. I started feeling a little better and pushing myself. Got back over here, and now I'm convinced that I want to do this, but it's on my terms.
Yeah.
So, I had up until October 31st, I had set hours still last year, and I'd be here Monday through Friday, 10 to 4 or something on Saturdays, and so I thought I put up hours saying from November 1st to April 1st, catch me if you can, more or less.
Yeah.
Well, then I got thinking, yeah, I kind of liked that. So when April 1st came, I thought, man, I don't want to commit myself to having set hours.
Mm-hmm.
I got different things I want to do,
Yeah.
but I still want to be here the majority of the time.
Yeah.
So I put up semi-retired on my display sign. No set hours or days, by chance or appointment, and then my phone number.
Yeah.
And I do feel bad sometimes if I miss people, but I do if I leave from here, I call forward my regular number that people would call me here to my cell phone.
Yeah.
So I can still talk to
You can
people.
pick it up, yeah.
Yeah, but I still know I miss 66 travelers, but I'm 71.
Yeah.
I don't want to do what I see a lot of these other 66 people did. They died with the place.
Yeah.
Gary Turner.
Yeah.
But that was Gary's passion. He wanted to be there.
Yeah.
Up in Springfield, Illinois, we had Bill Shea. I don't know if you ever heard of Bill Shea.
I've heard of it, yeah.
He had a gas station petroleum museum, and Bill wanted to be there.
Yeah.
Well, maybe I'm a little different. I got other things that I want to, from time to time, take off. Yesterday, I took off and helped a friend straighten out her garage for a while.
Yeah.
You know, and then I came back here, I put the bunnies out.
Yeah.
I feel rejuvenated.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Good.
not burnt out.
Good.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for speaking with us. Rich Henry of Henry's Rabbit Ranch in Staunton, Illinois.
Staunton, Illinois.